Hello and a very good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us on our Saturday live show on Catholics at Home. Really lovely to see everyone right here. Some of you very early as well. Thank you for joining us. Well, as we wait for a little more people to join us, just like to say a warm welcome to those who have been chatting with us on our comments and chat box. Thank you very much, Aaron, for asking us how we are doing during the MCO. Well, as well as we can manage, I suppose. Aaron, I hope you are doing well as well. I also like to say hi to Valerie, Sheena, Kathleen, Christine, Michael, Ellen, Angela, Sujin. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm sure more people are joining us because it's a very important and crucial topic, I suppose, everywhere you go these days, whether at home or at work or when you meet up with anybody. Question is, are you going to take the vaccine? So what's the answer? Well, we get a lot of different kind of responses, and because of the different information that we are getting, you may get your information from news sites, WhatsApp, Facebook, whatever, and some may be accurate, some not so accurate. All right, so we're going to try and clear things up today. That's why the title of the show is To Be or Not to Be Vaccinated. We're going to talk about the myths and the facts. All right, so a lot to talk about. And why don't I just go straight into bringing in our residential priest? That's the new title. Father Clarence, is that your new title? Residential priest.
Kevin, I think this one, everybody coined some word to describe me in some way. Yeah. Good morning, Kevin. How are you? Haven't seen you for a long time.
Yeah, I'm trying to live a hermit's life, secluded from everybody.
That was your Lent resolution, is it, to be cut off from everybody else?
No, exactly, because why we are talking about this. The more people you meet, the more different perspectives and views you get about the vaccine. Then the more confused you get.
Yeah, Kevin.
Anyway, it's good to see that we've got a lot of other talented people hosting the show, and really enjoyed seeing all of them. Jonathan, Mac, Patrick, Glenn, and everybody. Yeah. How are you, Father?
Well, no, I was just going to say that, Kevin, it's 27th of March. If you remember, last year, this time, we were trying to put a start to this Catholics at Home. You remember all the discussions that we were having and between you, Mark, and myself.
Yeah,
and we had our
we didn't know how we're going to turn out, right?
And we didn't think that we were going to last so long either. So it's going
probably
to be
after, yeah, probably after MCO, no more Catholics at Home lah. But then 1 year on, how many MCOs already? We're still here.
And we have more people participating, helping us.
Lovely, wonderful.
It's been a journey. Yeah, it's a journey to celebrate. I think this Easter is a journey for us to celebrate our first anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully Father, the first of many more.
Yeah, speaking about Easter, right? So tomorrow is Palm Sunday, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was thinking, right? It feels like Ash Wednesday was like 3-4 months ago. I don't know. Is it just me, or is Lent this time very, very long?
Yeah, I guess because some people say, life was a bit slow during the MCO, but I kind of found it, the days go by very quickly, Kevin. I kind of I start on a Monday, and then the next thing I know, it's like, it's Thursday, Friday, and then it's the weekend again.
Of course, Father, because you've got podcasts going on, talks here, talks there, everything. I don't know how you do it, man. Getting used to all this virtual lifestyle,
as I said, something the seminary never prepared any one of us for this. We got to look at the book.
There's going to be a syllabus. New syllabus.
Exactly.
All right. So, Father Clarence, big topic today. A lot to talk about, and the thing is, right? I don't know why I see celebrities, some sports people and all that telling me to go and take the vaccine. I know they are good at what they do, but I'm not really convinced with how much they know about medical stuff and, virus and everything, I don't know whether they know how to search and where to get the information. They probably get it from Instagram or Facebook or something like that. So I think we need more people in the medical field to come out and talk, right? Because, like I said, I like them, no offense, and everything, but telling me to take the vaccine, I'm like, I'm not sure, so it's good we have this conversations like this. And today we have the consultant or expert in infectious diseases, and he's from Hospital Sungai Buloh. Let's welcome Dr. Benedict Sim. Hi, Dr. Ben.
Hi. Hi, Kevin.
Morning,
Hi, Tata.
morning, Dr.
Morning,
Ben.
morning, morning. Thanks for having me here. Yeah.
Dr. Ben, tell us more about yourself.
Um, Grew up in Malacca, and I serve now in the hospital Sungai Buloh. So I'm a clinician there. I see patients every day, and I specialize in this field, a little known field called infectious diseases, which has become more widely known over this last 1 year, because this is the sort of thing that we've uh, been prepared for, and what we were geared up to face. Yeah.
You say you being in this little known field, right? But I'm sure you've dealt with many other diseases before. How unique is this COVID-19 this time around for you, in your field?
I think we had a foretaste of it. I think back in 2003, 2004, when the world had this SARS outbreak,
SARS,
and
yeah.
that was sort of like the first time when we realized that even hospitals and governments and all that may not be really fully prepared to face infectious disease that can spread through people coughing, sneezing, or talking. But that thankfully went away very fast, probably because the virus couldn't spread as easily. And along the way, we have had many warnings. You may have heard of bird flu, and there was one, I think, swine flu, which came in 2009. So that also hit us in quite a big way, and that made its way around the world in a couple of months. And then we've got some other nasty, really nasty bugs like MERS-CoV from the Middle East,
Yeah.
Ebola from Central Africa. So these were all very worrying conditions as well. But I think none of them made that successful leap into um, right into the stratosphere, and where the whole world had to face a lockdown and all that. And I think so. This COVID sort of like occupies a middle ground where it is not that deadly to kill enough people, where everybody will be really, really, really scared and don't do anything. But at the same time, it can spread from people who don't have symptoms, or can spread from people before they start symptoms. And understandably, many people are lulled into a sense of it can't be that bad. Very few people die, and so precautions may be, people may take shortcuts and all that, and it just goes on and spreads. And unfortunately, it discriminates, and this virus, it tends to hit the elderly in a nasty way, and some young people as well, especially if they've got other diseases, and heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes. So they get hit especially badly. So it is it is something quite unique, and I think all of us have seen it unfold in real time. I think in the last 1 year, and we doctors are learning a lot, and I think epidemiologists are learning a lot, and governments are learning as we go along as well.
Just when you thought you've seen it all, here comes COVID.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, Dr. Ben, as you describe, when you are in the right in the middle of the, let's say, the war zone, you're right there. After 1 year, we've heard, how frontliners have had to struggle through this 1 year. With the sign of the vaccine, in terms of the frontliners in the hospital, are their morale slightly uplifted now? A little more, hopeful in that sense, because, at one time I know we had a lot of images of people in the front line really exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally drained. Are things like, I don't want to use the word perking up, but, are they more hopeful with now dealing with this?
I think the fear factor is definitely less with with the vaccines, because I think the vaccines have been shown to be very effective to curtail severe disease. So I think the fear among healthcare workers
Dr. Ben, I just want to ask if you could speak a little bit louder. I think we're having a bit of an
sorry.
audio difficulty. Yeah.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the fear among healthcare workers has come down a notch, and the vaccines. Many of us healthcare workers have started being vaccinated. Some are halfway through. For the vaccines to actually fully be effective, it takes about maybe about 6 weeks from the start of when you get your first shot till the time when the immune system matures. So many people are sort of like in the middle of that 6 week journey. But we can already, but among doctors, frontliners, I think the fear is a bit less. And what we are really hoping for, at least in the hospital front, is that the correct people get vaccinated early on, and that is so that we will see less ill patients coming in to hospitals. If somebody young and healthy like Kevin gets COVID, chances are you have a mild disease, but if somebody elderly gets COVID, or somebody with other medical conditions gets it, it can be a very, very nasty disease. So hopefully that group of the population gets vaccinated as early as possible, so that it moves away from being a nightmare disease to manage in hospitals.
So when you're talking about this, like goals and targets that we need to achieve, right? We've heard that we need a herd immunity of 70 or 80% of the population. Do you think we can reach that goal? Is that a realistic goal? Or maybe you want to start off by explaining about what is herd immunity?
Right. Yeah. So the vaccines work in three ways. Broadly, they work in 3 ways. We know very well that they protect the individual from getting, especially from dying from COVID or getting severe disease from COVID. Yeah, and to a certain extent, it also prevents somebody from actually getting COVID. Less effective there, but very effective to prevent getting severe COVID or getting symptoms of COVID. Yeah? Um, so the individual is protected. At the moment at home, I live with two elderly people, so I also protect them, because if I'm less likely to contract the disease, and if I get the disease and the symptoms are very mild, I will be churning out less germs. So the chances of me infecting my loved ones who are living with me will be less. So I'm protecting myself at one level and protecting my loved ones at another level. And what happens is that in the community, there will be people that for some reason or another can't get the vaccine, either because they are allergic to the vaccine, or because they are too frail and they're bedridden, they can't, just logistically they can't access the vaccine. So there may be some people with very good reasons why they can't get the vaccine. So will they ever be protected? They can be protected if they are surrounded by people who actually have been vaccinated, so that there's very little or not enough germs to go around to infect these people who can't get vaccinated. Once that level happens, where there are very few people in society who haven't been vaccinated, and they are mostly surrounded by people who are vaccinated, that's what we call as herd immunity. That means the chances of them getting the infection is much less. The other analogy that I sometimes use is, how when WhatsApp wanted to cut down on fake news being spread around, one of their strategies was to only allow you to forward the message to one person and not 30 people in your list. Because they knew that by doing, theoretically, you can still do it. You can do it one by one, until 30 people. But they knew that by doing that, then the news gets the sending out of the news gets cut down dramatically, and then the wrong news gets lessened. So in a way, it's a bit like herd immunity. How herd immunity works. If there's enough people who are vaccinated, even those who are not vaccinated, sort of like protected by the surrounding people, yeah. And so, but to achieve herd immunity is an ambitious goal, because we really need the whole of society to come on board, and nobody knows exactly what's the tipping point, what's the critical mass, is it 60, 70%, 80%, and it might be challenging, because mainly because the vaccine itself is not licensed for children, and that itself is a big chunk of the population already. But that would be ideal if we can reach herd immunity. It means that then society is protected, and you can actually do away with many of the precautions that we are taking now. And yeah.
I just want
to no, you're talking about fake news, people forwarding fake news. I was in a forum yesterday, and among church leaders, there was a poll done prior to the discussion, and the poll showed that if the vaccine was given, how many of you would take it? Only 60% said yes. So there's still a good number of people who are who have either decided no, or maybe they are undecided. And I think that's the difficulty, is that reaching that herd immunity is to be able to convince those who are sitting on the fence, who are not so sure. So perhaps, there's a lot of information out there. Maybe that's why this morning we said that let's address the myths that are out there. People are getting, for every, as I said yesterday, for every one advocate, there are 10 other articles out there who say that you shouldn't be taking it. And people are people's eyes are fixed on what they should not be doing. Perhaps, Kevin, we want to take we have 10 myths this morning that we thought we could address very briefly to help clarify people. And hopefully Dr. Ben is here, our specialist, to tell us, how do we respond to these myths that are out there, in the media, in every other form. Perhaps we take the first myth. Oh, sorry.
Just before that, I just wanted to emphasize something, or clarify something, like what Dr. Ben said just now, because I'm pretty clueless when the slogan is Lindung Diri, Lindung Semua, right? So I understand Lindung Diri because you get a vaccine, then your antibodies can help you fight the disease and stuff. But I didn't really understand how it can Lindung Semua, because you can still get the virus and you can still spread the virus. So that's true, right? But Dr. Ben, you're saying that the chances of spreading and or getting the virus is less. So that's where the Lindung Semua comes in, right? Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Okay.
So two things. One is you are less likely to contract the virus if you have been vaccinated early on. When the results of the vaccine came out, we were not certain there, because the purpose of the trials were not actually to study whether people actually get the virus. But now I think there's enough data that shows that it also cuts down. It's not as effective as protecting you against severe disease, but it looks like it has got quite significant impact on cutting down transmission as well. And then the other aspect of how it helps is that if I've got germs in my body, and if I'm everywhere I'm going, I'm coughing and sneezing, versus if I've got no symptoms or very, very mild symptoms, the amount of germs that I spew out from my body will be much, much less than if I'm ill. So the people in my house are less likely to get the disease from me as well. Yeah. So in that way, it's a two-pronged protection.
Right. All right. Great. Okay. So myth number 1. Researchers rush the development of the COVID-19 vaccine, so its effectiveness and safety cannot be trusted. When we say a rush, what's the usual timeline to really study a vaccine?
I remember, I think somebody asked me about 9 months ago about vaccines for COVID. This was in the middle of last year, and I laughed them off and I told them, nah, it won't come. By the time it comes, it will be the end of 2021. That's why we have to stick to and I thought I was speaking from a position of authority then, but obviously I was proven wrong. So the vaccines have come very fast, and understandably, people have actually cast doubts on it. The normal in the history of vaccines take several stages to develop before the time when it can be widely distributed. And even a very quick vaccine prior to this took about 5 years for it to mature to the stage where it could actually be sold or used widely. So has COVID-19 vaccines been made very quickly? Yes, it has been. In fact, it's really at light speed as far as vaccines are concerned. Over a matter of a few months, they've actually gone through all the stages. But I do want to emphasize that so broadly speaking, the initial part of the vaccines is the research part, what they call as the exploratory phase, where they actually study the virus and they see which part of the virus is the thing that can cause the disease or is the best target to create the vaccine. And that's the pure science of it. The clever scientists in the labs actually study that. And then once they find a candidate that they think that, okay, this is what would work and should work, then it goes into the preclinical trials. Preclinical, that means they actually test it out on animals and see whether it works there. And then if it works on animals and it's safe enough, that nothing happens to those animals, then they go on to the clinical stages. The clinical stages are where they actually test out the drug or the vaccine on people. So there are three clinical stages of importance. The first stage, they actually test it out on healthy young individuals, usually numbering about a few dozens, maybe until about 100, to see if there are any major side effects to them. And then if that's fine, then they go to the second stage, which is they test out a few hundred individuals, and this the purpose of this second stage would be actually to find what dose would be probably the best, would show the best effect, and at the same time minimal or and safety always comes throughout every stage. The safety of the vaccines, the safety of the drug or vaccines, that's first and foremost in the first priority. For all of these clinical stages. And then once it passes the second stage, they know what's the most effective dose. They know it is relatively safe. Then they test it out at the third stage on thousands of real life patients. The one vaccine that we have used so far, we've got two vaccines at the moment licensed in Malaysia. The Pfizer vaccine, they call it Comirnaty, and then there's a China one called by this company Sinovac. For example, the Comirnaty, the Pfizer one, was tested out on close to 40,000 patients, and they compared the two groups, those who received the vaccines versus those who didn't receive the vaccines, and how safe was it and how effective was it, and they found it to be very effective and relatively very safe. And every step of this way, there's actually safety monitoring happening, regulatory authorities. So these are people who are not involved in the clinical trial. They are not employed by the company. They are not employed by you can't buy them off because they are they are a standalone monitoring body that actually check to make sure that the subjects of these trials are still healthy, and that there's no cover up by the companies or the scientists who are doing these trials. And how they managed to compress everything into less than a year was that number one, the exploratory phase or the discovery phase, that one was done very quickly because the full gene of the virus was released way back even in January last year. So based on that, the scientists could actually start their work already. And as far as there's this one platform that they are using for this Pfizer vaccine. It's called mRNA technology. In fact, this technology is one of the things that makes people nervous because it's a new technology. But having said that, it was actually a technology that has been researched and has been used at very small levels actually in the decades before. And so it was sort of like a technology that was waiting to be, is already matured and waiting for the, a candidate germ that could benefit from this technology. And so because of that, they went into the clinical stages very quickly. They did the preclinical stages, they did clinical stages, and usually the normal process is to wait for one clinical stage to finish, then they go to the second, and then they go to the third. For this one, they were very quick in where they overlapped. So the first clinical stage was going on. By that time, they were doing the preparatory work for the second clinical stage, already recruiting people. Okay, who wants to go for the second stage? And then the second stage, once that had started, then they will started recruiting people for the third stage. So everything overlapped, and because of that, they were, and of course, the reason for that was because we were all seeing in real time that countries were getting decimated by this infection, and many people were dying. So there was a lot of necessity to make sure that the vaccines could come out quickly, but at the same time not compromising any of the safety steps.
Okay, so we rushed it, but we followed all the steps. So no cutting corners and stuff. Right?
That's right.
So that's good to know. All right. But Clarence, anything to add before we go to myth number 2?
No, let's take, Dr. Ben is the expert. So,
Okay, myth number 2. Getting the COVID-19 vaccine means I can stop wearing my mask and taking coronavirus precautions.
I think this is another thing that's, in fact, some people are choosing not to vaccinate because they're saying, if I can't take off my mask, that means you yourself are not sure of how effective this vaccine is, and because of that, I'm not going to get the vaccine, but actually it's the other way around. As I mentioned, if you get vaccine, many people actually may know this, but if you get COVID, there are actually different stages of the disease. So many of you would have known that at least half of the people who get COVID actually have no symptoms at all, and this is especially in those who are very young, in children, in teenagers. They can carry the disease and never know that they have COVID, and then maybe another 20% or so people actually get mild symptoms. So they get some runny nose and sore throat and a bit of a cough, a bit of a fever, but otherwise they feel well, no worse than other respiratory infections that you get along the way. And then a small group of people actually get severe disease. Severe disease, we would say, is when somebody starts needing oxygen, where they can't breathe on their own, and without oxygen they actually struggle on. And then you've got the next stage where people go into life-threatening infection. Life-threatening means they actually need to be in an ICU, and they need sometimes they need to even be on a life support machine, a ventilator, and of course there are small group of people that actually die from this disease. So what these vaccines started out, the intention of these vaccines was, number one, to prevent death. Number two was to prevent severe disease. And later on, the objective was to prevent COVID, yeah? Any type of symptoms. So it works very well at preventing death, preventing severe disease, and even preventing symptoms of disease. It works very well there. It has not the data has not been so strong in preventing asymptomatic disease. That means, or maybe you can call it a carrier of the disease. It is to a certain extent protective, but it is not. It is not. It is not that effective yet, yeah, to protect against carrying the disease. So because of that, we are saying you still wear your mask, not because we are worried that you can get COVID, but more of that you may be carrying COVID and giving it to somebody else. So because of that, we are still saying stick to the protocols, okay, until out there everybody you meet as is protected. Then you can consider taking off your mask. And I think in the US they have started doing that. So they have actually said that where, okay, if you are meeting in a place where everybody else has completed their vaccines, that 6 weeks have passed, and everybody else is protected, then actually you can meet without any mask. Because there's no fear of you passing on the disease to somebody else. Yeah? The balance of risk and benefit changes.
Do you think, Dr. Ben, this will help to bring down the number of infections? Because, like if everybody's like, we get vaccinated, then we think we're all right. Like you said, because of the asymptomatic patients and all that. And more of us will be going out more often, we'll be meeting more people and stuff like that, because we think, oh yeah, we're all vaccinated right now. But we'll be passing around the virus and all that, so the numbers won't go down, right? Is that a way to look at it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think so. That's why I think for the time being, the precautions in all countries is still the same. That the restrictions will have to remain, simply because it's going to take time to vaccinate to the critical phase, and we don't know how long it will take, or whether we will reach that critical mass yet. Yeah, so at the moment, I can foresee that we will be advised to stick by the protocols. But on the individual basis, as I mentioned, if somebody is meeting somebody else who is actually been fully vaccinated, then actually there's no risk of that person spreading to the other person. Yeah? But from a population level, when you go out to the street, when you go to the shops, when you go to the shopping, it is there's no way to know that everybody in that vicinity is protected. So you want to do what's responsible. You don't want to share. You may be carrying some germs, and you don't want to share it with other people.
I think that's the key here. Not to be complacent. I think that's the thing. Let's not be complacent. Yeah, that's the. Yeah. And what's next, Kevin?
Next, okay, let's talk about side effects. Very, very popular concern or myth. The side effects of the COVID-19 vaccine are dangerous. There are no long-term studies on side effects. How do you answer that, Dr. Ben?
Yeah. So I think that that second statement is absolutely true, that there's no long-term reports coming out, simply because it's impossible to come up with a long-term report. The vaccines started rolling out in a big way. In the earliest countries was middle of December. So at the most, we've got 4 months data from those countries. In Malaysia, it's only about a month, and that was only to healthcare workers. Yeah. So yes, there is no. If you're talking about long-term data in terms of 1 year and 2 year safety data, yes, obviously it's not available, and it will not be available yet. The good news is that most so vaccines are not new, and we've got numerous other diseases that are curtailed by vaccines, and massive vaccination programs, whether it's for newborns, for children, has always been carried out. And what we do know from vaccines is that almost all the side effects, or all the side effects of vaccines, actually come in the hours to days after you get the vaccine. At the longest it stretches on is maybe a few weeks. after somebody gets the vaccine. It can come as early as a few minutes after getting the vaccines, and usually those actually allergic reactions certain vaccines, and this vaccine is one of them as well. So there's actually a lot of so after everybody gets the injection, you just can't go home. You actually need to be monitored for a few minutes in the clinic or in the vaccination center. Um, that's to make sure you don't get a nasty allergic reaction from the vaccines. And then, but most other side effects, if they were to come, they will to come in the days and the weeks to follow. Yeah, and that one we've got very very strong data now. I think worldwide there are hundreds of millions of people who have actually received the vaccines already, and you would have read in the newspapers that there were some disturbing trends where people were concerned, but by far and large, the vaccines have been very, very safe. In fact, it's actually a testament to all the great work those scientists and all have done. It's proven to be by far and large a very safe and effective vaccine. So yes, there is no long-term data simply because it's impossible to come up with long-term data. But the fact is that most side effects to vaccines appear in the immediate in the minutes, days, or in minutes, hours, or days after you get the vaccine. And for that, the data is strong that it is very safe.
Dr. Ben, we know that you were saying earlier, you yourself, you have received the vaccination, and people will say,
Right.
I think the best testimony is the people who have received it, and we read that, there's like localized pain. We read about there could be some kind of fatigue, we hear things like, you could get some chills, Did you have any of those?
Yeah, after my first jab, the pain in my arm, I couldn't comb my hair, which is very good, which wasn't that bad. I don't have much hair, yeah. So that was about a day or so. But by the third day, it had gone off. And my second jab was it really went very smoothly. I got my second jab at the beginning of this week, and I really actually I didn't get even the pain in the arm was actually much less. But it's true, some people can actually get a fever after the vaccine. They can get and together with the fever, you can get chills, shivering, and some people can find their glands swollen, what we call as lymph nodes that gets swollen. All of that is actually the sign that your body is actually responding to the vaccine. That means your immune system is kicking in. It's detected that there's something foreign coming in, and that's the purpose of the vaccine, which is actually to train your body to react to a foreign that foreign substance, so that when you actually face the real COVID, your body is primed. Your immune system is primed, and it can attack the virus straight on and doesn't allow it a foot.
Some people were jokingly saying it's better that you have some signs so that you got the real stuff and not some placebo.
That's true. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, Father, I cannot comb my hair. Don't forget.
Yeah, Dr. Ben and I got no problem.
Dr. Ben, I know we got a lot to cover, but just very quickly, can you talk about the blood clots? Because I think that's something that was going around, and of course, countries put on hold their vaccination program because of the blood clots. So maybe you can talk very quickly about that one.
Yes, so there have been some disturbing reports of young people getting diseases that are caused by blood clotting in the brain or in the heart, in the lungs as well. So these reports are, these conditions are scary conditions, yeah, and they happened like in the days after getting the vaccine. The vaccine in question was by this company called AstraZeneca. I think they combined with Oxford University to create this vaccine, and so there was a bit of so countries got concerned, and some countries have put a stop to that vaccine, or at least a temporary hold, until the regulatory authorities study these conditions more in depth. We've got to be clear also, but we've got to be clear about the magnitude of the problem. I think these were countries which had vaccinated like 20 million people, and the number of cases was, I think, I can't remember the exact number of people, but it was like a couple of dozens, maybe, of people that had this condition. So the rates of that complication was actually very, very low. Okay, that's one. But it was a serious condition to have. So then the next question would be that if they hadn't got the vaccine, would they have still gotten this condition? Because this condition is seen even in people who don't get the vaccine. It can happen spontaneously, and this blood clots. For example, there are certain risks of people getting blood clots, like if women are on oral contraceptive pills, they are at higher likelihood of getting blood clots. Were these women on oral contraceptive pills, or did they have any other diseases that put them at higher risk of getting a blood clot? So that reports haven't come out yet, and I think some countries have decided that they will not continue with that vaccine. They will use some other vaccine first until they are clearer about that. Yeah, and that's a good sign. I think that that the vigilance, what we call as the pharmacovigilance of this, it's not something that we are giving to people and just say that, if it happens, it happens, nothing to do with me. That there's a lot of regulation over this, and a lot of oversight to people actually monitoring whether these continue to be safe, or whether these very rare side effects may be a pattern. Yeah, so we await further reports, but so far it looks like the preliminary reports say that the rates of that happening for people without the vaccine is almost comparable to the rates of people who get the rates of it happening among people who got the vaccine. So and the jury is still out whether it is the vaccines actually increase the risk to a certain extent. Yeah, and yeah, we are still waiting for a bit more information on that. Yeah.
All right, good.
Yeah.
All right, moving along. Myth number 4. The COVID-19 vaccine enters your cells and changes your DNA. It's gene manipulation.
Right. Another, I think, a very common concern of people, and this one really makes the popular, it comes out in messages, in videos, in social media. I think this one is one of those, these governments, or these pharma companies, or this rich conglomerates, they're trying to, control populations and all that. It is true that the vaccines contain some of the vaccines, the way that it works, it contains actually genetic material that codes for parts of the virus. That is true. For example, this mRNA vaccine that I received, it contains a segment of the gene that codes for a part of the virus. And they call it the spike protein, that part of the virus. So the way you imagine it is like the virus is like a human body, and let's say they realize that the most harmful part of the virus is actually the hands of the virus. Okay, and so they took the genetic code that codes for the hands of the virus, and so they wanted to train our body, our immune system, to recognize the hands of the virus, so that when the virus actually does come in, the immune system attacks the hands and doesn't allow the hands to hold on to our cells. Yeah. So it does contain the genetic a small fragment of the genetic material that codes for that virus. But there are three things to note. Number one, it is a segment of the virus. It is not the whole virus, and so it is impossible for that virus to actually behave as if it is real COVID. Yeah, so it cannot go on to infect all your cells as how the real COVID germ does it. Yeah, and secondly is that so the genetic material goes into our cells. Our cells also is like it's like a factory, and you've got the heart of the factory called the nucleus of the cells. The nucleus of the cells is where our own gene sits in there. Okay, our genetic code sits inside the nucleus. This segment of gene doesn't come into the nucleus. It goes out into the outer parts of the cell, because over there it is manufactured. Our cells have got the factories have got this operation, the machinery to replicate the hands of the virus, the spike proteins. So it churns out those spike proteins, and then to sort of like and they present it to the immune system, and the immune system responds by making antibodies to it. So that the genes of the virus doesn't come into our genetic our DNA lah, our genetic. And the third thing to note is that there are some other technologies of COVID virus, which actually does use genetic material that does combine with our genes. It is brought in through another virus, okay, but this technology has actually been used for many years now in other vaccines as well, and they have shown that it is safe. The people in concern don't become mutants, they don't get special superpowers, or they don't develop any other strange diseases that otherwise they would not have they otherwise would have not gotten. So those technologies have been proven already. The only one that was new was this mRNA technology, but this mRNA technology, as I mentioned, it doesn't come anywhere near the nucleus, and after it codes for those spike proteins, the genetic thing just gets broken down within a few hours or a few days. So it doesn't leave anything behind. It just gets it. Our body just gets rid of it. Yeah. So using terms like gene manipulation is actually is a manipulative term. It's sort of like to scare people.
Sorry, Kevin. Kevin, you're not getting any superpowers after this. No Spider-Man,
no X-Men,
no X-Men. No, sorry. If you were hoping for that, it's not coming your way.
I should have paid more attention to biology in school. All this talk bringing back there. Okay, let's move along to the next one. Myth number 5: some vaccines work better for some people while others are not equally effective. So I should choose which works for me. Can choose, I thought cannot choose. You want to see the question again, is it?
As I mentioned earlier, the main target of the vaccine. It's all right. I think the main target of the vaccines is to prevent death and serious illness. And for that target, all the vaccines have been shown to be very effective. Yeah, and the differences between one or the other is very minor. It is, as I mentioned earlier, it's less effective against preventing infection. So infection and disease is actually slightly different. Infection means you got the germ, but you don't necessarily fall sick from the germ. Disease is when you actually exhibit symptoms and you can actually get the fall sick due to the disease. Yeah? So it is less effective in preventing infection, but it is very effective in preventing disease from the infection. Yeah. So and there are varying success rates depending on which vaccine is given, and then you would have heard also of this viral. The virus also has got variants. It's sort of like the virus has got different. Belongs to a different race. It's got the virus. They are all COVID viruses. But they are all there are some strains of the virus. We call them variants. Some of the variants of the virus may be less the vaccine may be less effective in preventing infections due to that
We have a little bit of difficulty.
strain of the virus.
Dr. Ben, can you hear us? Okay, looks like Father Clarence, you have to take over.
Yeah. No, I think that the situation is such that we don't have a choice, isn't it? I mean, it's not like I was saying yesterday. It's not like that you're going to arrive at the clinic and they say they're going to give you a menu now. You choose which one you want. It's not going to be that in any way. So at a time when we need to protect one another, I guess this seems to be the way forward for most of us. I guess we are still in phase 1. Many have not been called up. Have you registered, Kevin?
No.
Okay.
Our minister said that most Malaysians are having the wait and see approach. Well, I'm having the wait and see approach.
And hopefully after this you will decide.
Hopefully, Dr. Ben can convince us otherwise. Just while waiting, maybe we can read some of the comments that are coming in. We've had one just now, and Annie said that her friend in the UK had the chills and couldn't get warm, and her arm was hurting. But like you said, Father Clarence, at least we know we are getting the real deal, because that's what Dr. Ben was saying. It's supposed to make our body fight against it. So we are supposed to feel some sort of reaction to the vaccine.
But that's not something new, Kevin. I don't know whether you remember, when I think it was standard 6, I think, you have this BCG injections. Come to school.
Let me see if I still got that.
and I remember some of my friends developing, pain and some fever after that. They didn't come back to school. So it's not a new.
Those are the weak players, Father.
So it's not something that is totally new that we are hearing of. At least I'm hearing of. I know babies who are vaccinated sometimes, run a temperature after having, at least you hear from different people. Yeah.
And also one thing that I'm wondering, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but can we actually expect no side effects at all from any vaccine? You know what I mean? Because we need it to help fight. We might have some little side effects, like the doctor said, to help us, make our body stronger. So we might feel a little different. So of course, if it's detrimental, then that's a different story. Anyway,
Well, we wait for Dr. Ben, maybe just to address a little concern, actually among Catholic circles, at least being debated, whether they should take the vaccine or not, because people seem to be saying that these vaccines were tested on aborted fetuses. So they're saying we shouldn't cooperate. But I think one has to be very real that these cell lines that they were testing, they were way back in the 70s, in fact, that somehow we do not cooperate in the wrongdoings of the past. So I think there's something to remember, that when we talk about the principle of cooperation, that our connection is too far away. And I think the Vatican has come out with a couple of documents very clearly encouraging a lot of people to accept the vaccine, because that is one way of. Because I think the vaccine is an act of charity, isn't it? I mean, even now wearing a mask, keeping a distance is not so much. I mean, yes, it prevents, but the Christian duty is that it is also an act of charity to protect
Lindung semua lah.
Yeah, especially if you have a family member, an elderly family member, it's your responsibility to protect them. As much as we fix an alarm in the house, we have all kinds of gadgets in the house to prevent an intruder. I think the vaccine is like something like that, isn't it? To prevent an intruder, so that it protects others too.
All right, looks like Dr. Ben is back.
I'm not sure if my camera may be working, but yeah, I think the audio. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we can hear you.
I apologize. I think I didn't pay my internet bill. Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure where I got cut off, and yeah.
Yeah, we were just talking about the effectiveness of the vaccines, which is also along with our next myth, which we can go on to myth number 6. The vaccines are 95% effective. This means 5% of people vaccinated will still get severe COVID. Well, I think Dr. Ben earlier also mentioned that the risk are lower with the vaccination, right?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So this question, I think, requires me to explain how because as I was going through the myths and some of the videos that come out against this vaccine, one of the 95% effective, that means only 5% of people actually get 5% of people will still get severe disease from the vaccine. But that's not how the math is done. So how it works is that in the clinical trials, for example, there were in the Pfizer clinical trial, they had 18,000 people who received the vaccine and 18,000 people who actually received just salt water, what we call as placebo. And the patients didn't know what they received, because if they knew what they received, then maybe you can say that, they were less careful or they were more careful. And the doctors also didn't know what they were receiving. So that the doctors couldn't be biased into, this one I won't test him, or this one I will test him. And then they let these people go, and they were advised, any symptoms, you come back, we want to test you whether you've got COVID. So they let them go their way, and within that 3 months, 170 people actually contracted COVID. Yeah, and at the end of once they reach 170 people, then they say, let's unmask the codes that these people had. So let's say if Kevin, you received code number 13748, so they uncoded yours, and they found that, okay, Kevin contracted COVID, but he received placebo, he received the salt water, and then they go on to uncode all the 170, and they found that 162 people who contracted COVID actually received the salt water. They didn't receive COVID. They didn't receive the vaccine. Yeah, and 8 people who actually contracted COVID received the vaccine. So based on that, they are saying that the likelihood of if you have got COVID after you get if you've got either placebo or vaccine, the likelihood of you having received the vaccine is only 5%. Okay, whereas people who didn't receive the vaccine had like 20 times higher chance of getting COVID, getting symptoms of COVID. So that's how the math is calculated for 95%. Because I saw in some videos, they're saying that if 5% of people get severe disease, I'm still going to take my chance by not being vaccinated, because after all, the rates of people getting severe disease are almost 5% anyway. But that's not, we are not talking about the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. Shall we move on? Myth number 7. Only 0.1% of people die from COVID, which is the same as influenza. So all this attention about COVID is just over the top. All media hype. Vaccines are not needed.
Okay, I thought this one is important to to clarify. Yeah? It is true that in Malaysia at the moment, if you look at the statistics, I think about the death rate from COVID is like 0.4%. That means for every 1,000 people who get COVID, and that doesn't sound like it is very worrying. 4 out of 1,000 people dying. Um, uh, However, I think I want to look. I want to invite us to look at it from a different point of view. Um, the amount of people that actually get severe disease from COVID, severe disease, as I mentioned earlier, means you reach a point where you need oxygen in order to survive. That's when they start giving you quite strong medications as well. These patients, the journey of COVID is actually a very tough journey because many of them stay in the hospital for a prolonged period of time. If they need to go into ICU, they can stay on for weeks and even months in ICU, and the disease really puts a large toll on the body. They come out with residual, when they leave hospital, they've actually got residual damage done to their bodies, especially their lungs. Their lungs may never return back to normal, and they can have other organs getting affected. They can have heart attacks or strokes or other nasty infections from being in hospital for a prolonged period of time on very high uh, um, doses of medicines that suppress the immune system. So it is actually a very nasty journey, and the amount of people who actually get severe disease in COVID is 8%, and it really depends on how old you are and how many other diseases you have. For example, if you are in the fifth decade of life, from 40 years old to 50 years old, the chances of you getting severe disease is 2 in 100. Okay, so that means if 100 of my classmates, we meet together and all of us get COVID, two of us will get five of us will get severe disease. Okay, the rate among that population is about 5%. Yeah, and but if we look at people above the age of when you reach 70 years old, then the chances of you getting severe disease is 1 in every 4. And this is from our own local Malaysian data. That means anybody above the age of 70, a quarter of them will end up needing oxygen, and the death rates also are very different for the age group. For the age group, 1 in 8 people will not survive this disease. You will actually succumb to this disease. So if 8 people, in their 70s, meet together, mahjong kakis meet together, and all happen to get COVID, one of them definitely will not survive. Yeah, above the age of 80, we are talking about almost a quarter of people will not survive this disease. So the how we look at the statistics, because the statistics are actually skewed quite a lot towards those who are very young. Those below the age of 30, the risk of complications are very low. The risk of death is extremely low. Yeah, but when we look at the elder age group, or even if you are younger but you've got diabetes or you've got kidney disease or lung disease, then it becomes very significant.
Right. So there's a bigger picture to look at for this one.
Yes.
Let's move on to myth number 8. The vaccines makes a person infertile. The vaccine is not safe for pregnant people and young people. And also, Dr. Sim, maybe I can add, how about people who are trying to have a baby,
Right.
as well, not just the pregnant women, but even men and women trying to conceive.
Yeah, so this came out as a concern, I think, in some of the social media messages that people were getting and in the videos. It is true that when they did the clinical trials, they didn't include people who were pregnant, because normally when you start off in a clinical trial, you just want to make it as simple as possible to know whether these people will benefit, and it's safe for them or not. So it's a graduated risk. So and I think there was at least one report that actually said that some of the contents of the vaccine was similar to placental tissue, the placenta in a pregnant lady, which helps to sustain the pregnancy. Yeah, but later on, a lot of other scientists came and said, no, that was actually incorrect science, and that even though it was similar, but it doesn't affect the safety of the pregnancy. Since then, I think it is important to know that uh, I think at least in the US, there are some 30,000 pregnant women who are on the registry of, and this was data up to a month ago, in December. There are like 30,000 pregnant women being monitored, who have gotten the vaccine, and the reports coming out are very positive that some have already delivered, and the babies were fine, the mothers were fine, and those who haven't delivered yet, from the ultrasound follow-ups and from the progress of the pregnancy, it looks like it does absolutely nothing to the pregnancy. So while formal reports haven't come out yet, there's already real life experiences being shared by doctors taking care of pregnant women who have gotten the vaccine. As far as the side effect of infertility is concerned, that one is way out from the left field, because I think in all the history of vaccines, and in I think infertility has never been infertility has never been that side effect that we need to be concerned about. So this one, it really appears as if it is just out there to scare people against the vaccine. But let's think of what's the worst side effect that people can occur to people, and just put it out there. Since there's no way for them to disprove it. So not knowing yet about something doesn't equate to that something being harmful, or being something to be feared about.
Yeah, true. All right. Myth number 9: vaccines will only be effective a few weeks, as they won't work when the COVID virus mutates. I think as you were talking about the variants of the virus, possibly there'll be more variants coming out. So will it be effective, or will they update the vaccine, Dr. Ben?
Yes. So there are variants of the virus. There's been some, in particular, which I think you can read on them, even in the news outlets. UK has a variant, South Africa has a variant, Brazil has a variant, the US has got a couple of variants that they are worried that may not work. So the vaccines may not be as protective against those variants compared to the run-of-the-mill COVID virus. But as I mentioned earlier, that to a certain extent that is true. But when it comes to protecting against serious disease and death, it still looks like it's very effective. We do not know at the moment how these variants will pan out, how well they can be transmitted, and how dominant it's going to be in the future. Yeah. After all this vaccine gets rolled out. So there's a theoretical risk that the vaccines may last perhaps for a year. The effectiveness of the vaccines may last for a year, and then will there be a need for a booster jab? There is a possibility that would happen. All right. We don't know that yet. It's still much too early for us to envision that far, but there is a possibility that can happen. But at the moment, it looks like it's very effective, even among the variants, to prevent serious disease and death. And that's for us the most important thing, because if you can prevent death and serious disease, then COVID becomes just like influenza or some other respiratory illness where we are not so scared about. I think in 2009, people were very scared about, influenza, H1N1, people were talking about H1N1. Nowadays, H1N1 is just a normal flu. Okay. So it may go down the same route as well. But at the moment, the most important thing is to protect those who are elderly from getting severe disease.
Dr. Ben, why some vaccines need 2 shots and some need only 1? And I mean, is it something to be concerned about the effectiveness of the vaccine?
It's actually how the immune system works. Our immune system actually, as I mentioned, the vaccines, they work by being a practice target for our immune system. And the first round, the first time around, even with one shot, the vaccine is to a certain extent protective already. I think it gives you about 50% protection from severe disease 2 weeks after the first shot. But they find that when you help the body to practice even more by giving them a second shot of the same thing, then the immune system really matures and realize and sort of like you've taught the immune system that, hey, this guy may come back again, and so you strengthen the immune system. The immune system is learning about this infection. That's how our immune systems work. So far, there's been one vaccine where they show that one shot is enough, and it's not so much about is it a different technology, but it could be that the dosage that they give for that particular vaccine is higher than other vaccines, and they perhaps used a different type of gene sequence that help to the body to respond. Why is it they could give a higher dose compared to other vaccines? So it looks very attractive to just get one shot, because from a practical point of view, if we have to vaccinate millions of people, it's much easier for them to just get one shot. But yes, it actually boils down to how effective is it going to be for that particular company. I think it's called the Johnson and Johnson vaccine. That one, they have shown that one shot is actually adequate.
All right. And let's round it up with myth number 10. The COVID-19 vaccine was developed with or contains controversial substances against the Catholic faith.
I believe this one, I think Father was alluding to it just now during my interruption reception.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
You want to add anything, Dr. Ben?
No, nothing more than what you have mentioned, Father. I think on one hand, I think it is true that we have to be concerned about how these vaccines are developed. Were they developed in an ethical way? Was the science and technology, in keeping with ensuring that people were not harmed along the way, and people would include aborted fetuses, and whether that whether there was any in that direct or indirect way that it promotes abortion through by this research into vaccines. But I think, as Father mentioned, I think there's these were done on cell lines, I think, back from decades ago, and I think the link between the research done for this vaccine and the fetal cells were like very distant, not just in time, but in terms of the stages of the. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, they took the original research was on some aborted fetal cells, but later on that was translated into other different fields of research, and so there's no direct link with what happened those many years ago. But I think it is I think it is an important reminder. I think if there are Catholics out there who are listening to this podcast, I think young Catholics who who are going to the field of science, I think it'd be great to have a lot more Catholics that have the wisdom of the Church to to guide even scientific the direction of scientific research, and to ensure that ethical standards are kept at all times, and that nobody is harmed by any of this research.
Right. And of course, Father Clarence, you did a show on the vaccine about Catholic morality and the vaccine. So
That's
anyone
right, yeah.
watching, they can also go back and find that podcast and listen to it, which was very helpful. I watched that one. Anything to add, Father Clarence, before we end the show?
Yeah, Dr. Ben, just going to ask you, it's Holy Week. People can't wait to get back to church. We are having to turn people away. What would be your words of wisdom to those who are going back to church this Holy Week? Because we are going to have multiple services, different groups of people coming in. What would be from having seen this truth since the beginning, what would your advice be?
Right. Thanks, Father. So I think all the churches have this standard operating procedure where you need to be registered, where the church cannot be too crowded, and where there are things that you have to wear a mask and that you have to be distant from people. I think all of those are actually very important advice. Number one, the vast majority of us have not been vaccinated yet. And number two, as I mentioned, even if you have been vaccinated, chances are people around you have not been vaccinated. And I want to give a shout out also to because I think as the restrictions got relaxed, at least in the Klang Valley, over the last 3 weeks or so, we've been seeing people getting a lot more daring and a lot of adventurous. I would like to put some caution on there. In particular, for example, eating outside. If you're eating outside, um, I don't intend to make it disadvantageous for any restaurant, but I would personally, I would say, go to a restaurant that is open air, not a restaurant that is closed up, air conditioned. Go to an open air restaurant, or better still, if you can tapao your food back home. So go for open spaces. Open spaces means there's a lot of ventilation, and where there's a lot of exchange, where if there's anybody there with the virus just gets diluted very quickly as he breathes out. The same concept would be in churches, whether it's in church meetings or whether it's in churches. Open up the windows, increase the ventilation, because that makes it much safer. I think there were studies very early on in COVID that actually showed that the risk of getting COVID from being in a enclosed space, as compared to an open space, was like 11 to 18 times higher, the risk of getting COVID. So it is the magnitude of safety from being in an open space is almost as much as the magnitude of safety you get from getting the vaccine. I know the vaccine is supposed to be like 20 times safer. If you get the vaccine, but if you were to gather in an open air space, it's much less. Because I can understand everybody is after 1 year of shutdown, everybody is just itching to go out and meet friends, and we all look forward to Holy Week next week. It's a very, very meaningful time, and we want to spend some time with our friends and loved ones. Do so in open spaces. I think that is actually very safe, and be careful of meals, because meals are the times when you actually have to take off your mask, and if you have to take off your mask, then that's where you really want to ensure that you are far from each other, or there's a lot of dilution of air by good ventilation.
So to everyone out there who's going back to church, do take the precautions. Let's not be complacent. I mean, I guess going back to church is such a great joy for many people, especially this Holy Week, having missed it last year, in fact. But I think we cannot let our guard down. Our goal is to keep our churches open as long as possible. So everyone has to take an important part in keeping each other safe. I think that's an important point that Dr. Ben brings out to all of us. Yes, going back to church is important. Keeping others safe too is just as important.
Yeah, and not just Holy Week, Father. Like I said, vaccinated or not vaccinated, I think the SOP, social distance, is still the best way to avoid getting the virus, right? All right, so we've been more than an hour, 1.5 hours actually, but it's a very important topic, and thank you all for still staying with us on the show. We apologize for any technical problems that we had earlier, but I'm sure you can go back and watch it again and get the full answers to all your questions and all the myths that we've been presenting to you, 10 of them all together. So really, thank you very much to Dr. Benedict Sim. He's a consultant of infectious diseases at Hospital Sungai Buloh. Thank you so much for explaining and clarifying a lot of these points for us this morning, Dr. Ben. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Father.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay, Father, shall we close the show with a prayer?
Yes, let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God, our loving Father, as we approach and Holy Week, we humbly ask you to be with us as we focus on the cross of Jesus. May we put our eyes on Christ, who gave himself for all of us. We pray that during this time you will protect each one of us, the people all over the world. Pray for people like Dr. Ben and many others who work tirelessly in trying to bring a resolution, to bring an end to this pandemic. We pray that our lives may truly be dedicated to you in all that we do, to be able to protect ourselves and to protect others in a way of loving you and loving ourselves in the way you've called us to. And so we ask you to bless each one of us as we journey into Holy Week. May our eyes be set on Jesus, the one who has given us all by his cross. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you for the clearance for the closing prayer once again. Thank you, Dr. Ben. And also thank you to all of you for joining us this morning. Just like to mention a few names: Dorothy, Cecilia, Aaron, Angeline, Bella, Jude. Thank you for joining us. Vivian, a lot of you joining us this morning. Thank you for being here. We wish you a blessed Palm Sunday and also a blessed Easter, and we'll see you soon. Now, don't forget, if you haven't subscribed or liked or followed our channel, you can do that. So you can do so right now. It's Catholics at Home. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, and really almost everywhere. Just find us, like us, subscribe, and yes, get updated to all our talk shows. And of course, we have a praise session every Friday evening. That'll be great. And we'll be having more talks about this kind of topics. Hopefully, more talks on vaccination as well in the weeks to come. All right. So do have a blessed weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.